20 specialists couldn't solve this problem until the poor cleaning lady walked by and fixed it in a minute. Unbeknownst to her, the millionaire was watching her from behind, and what he did next surprised everyone. Before we start the story, tell us in the comments from which city you're watching us. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. This is absurd. 20 specialists, 20 people thinking. And no one can solve this damn equation? An engineer shouted, swirling his coffee cup forcefully, as if that would help him think faster. Ethan's really going to lose his patience, a colleague murmured, as the sound of the argument pierced through the glass door for the third time that night. In the hallway, outside the boardroom, Laura Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart with the expertise of someone who had heard this kind of chaos more times than she cared to. With one earbud playing quiet salsa and the other tuned to corporate drama, she mopped the floor with precision and a hint of sarcasm in her gaze. The door burst open with a muffled bang. 3 engineers emerged like office zombies, with deep, dark circles under their eyes, pale faces, spreadsheets in their hands. The last one dragged 2 pizza boxes and a weariness bordering on collapse. As soon as the group disappeared into the elevator, Laura entered the room, sighing heavily. She left the mop in a corner, tossed the rag into the bucket with a certain dramatic flair, and turned to the digital whiteboard, which remained lit with a series of red numbers and symbols. Classic. No one solves it, but leaving everything a mess, they do that well. She took a dry cloth just to clean the poorly made scribbles. It was a routine cleaning, until unintentionally, her eyes stopped at the center of the equation. She froze. Huh? Let's see. She approached slowly, studied the numbers, then stepped back 2 paces, leaning her body as if seeking another perspective. She leaned on the cart and crossed her arms. It can't be? So much trouble for such a simple solution? Without much thought, she grabbed a red marker from the tray. She began to write below the main formula. Short strokes, basic substitutions, a logical inversion. Small corrections, no magic. In seconds, a new version of the problem appeared, this time with a clear result. Done. I broke a sweat, and it was at that moment that a firm voice sounded behind her. Who touched this formula? Laura spun around so fast she almost knocked over the cart. Standing in the doorway, like a judge at a championship final, was Ethan Smith, CEO of Smith Tech. Tall, imposing, impeccable hair, well-fitted suit, and a gaze that seemed to pierce through walls. Was it you? He asked, taking a step forward. Of course not. It was Rodolfo, she said, pointing to the mop in the corner. He's excellent at algebra. A silence filled the air. Just kidding. It was me. Ethan approached and closed the visor without taking his eyes off her. He examined the solution, then looked back at Laura. He alternated between the formula and her face, trying to connect the pieces. Do you have any idea what you've just solved? Well, at least I know you don't need to hire another international consultant. It's just a matter of talking to the cleaning team once in a while. We're more versatile than you think. He ignored her provocative tone. He pulled a tablet from the inside pocket of his jacket, opened an application, and began to compare the new formula with the original problem. This is brilliant. None of our specialists thought of this path. Laura leaned on the cart as if watching a cheap play. Maybe they're so busy wanting to be brilliant that they forget that basic works too. Where did you learn this? 2 years of university. Engineering. I had to drop out because I couldn't keep paying. Working and studying at the same time is tiring. I guess you've never had to do that. He looked up, surprised by her direct answer. It was rare, perhaps unheard of, for someone within the company to speak to him like that. And with irony, no less. Who has such an attitude and an unusual sense of humor? If a cleaning lady doesn't learn to laugh at the absurd, she goes crazy. Do you want me to erase this now, or leave it for the next shift? Don't touch anything. This will be presented at the board meeting early tomorrow. He hesitated. Then he looked at her again, with more curiosity than distrust. I want you to be there too. Lara raised an eyebrow, suspiciously. Seriously? You're going to include me in the team of underestimated midnight geniuses? Not exactly. I just want to understand your way of thinking. How did you get to that? She thought for 2 seconds. Then she shrugged. If you let me bring my lucky bucket, I'll go. Ethan, the man known for freezing meetings with a single glance, let out a faint sigh. It was almost a smile, but not quite yet. Done. Lara picked up her bucket, pushed the cart toward the door as if nothing had happened. Before leaving, she turned her head over her shoulder. Good night, boss. Oh, and try to smile once in a while. They say it makes you look younger. He stood there, staring at the corrected equation. The calculations were correct. The logic was solid. But what intrigued him most was the young woman who had done all that as if she were just cleaning a dirty window. And for the first time in months, he smiled. The morning arrived too soon for Lara Rodriguez. After finishing her second shift, at the cafeteria at 6 in the morning, she barely had time to change out of her uniform, grab a quick coffee, and take a deep breath before returning to Smith Tech. Ethan Smith's invitation, or rather, summons, still seemed like a game show joke to her. As she entered through the service door, Lara found no laughter or applause. She found glances, many of them, some curious, others suspicious, but most uncomfortable. The elevator ascended to the 40th floor, where the air seemed denser. The hallways were too silent. When the doors opened, Lara pushed her cleaning cart with the same confidence as always, as if it were just another workday. But the temporary badge hanging from her neck said otherwise. At the end of the hallway, the main boardroom was full. All the engineering team members, analysts, directors, and coordinators were there. In the center, standing, like an orchestra conductor about to begin an awkward symphony, was Ethan Smith. Good morning, he said in a firm voice. Good morning, Lara replied with a shy look. A low murmur ran through the room. Some frowned, others discreetly smiled. As I promised, Ethan said, ignoring the comment. Ms. Rodriguez is here to explain how she arrived at the solution to the problem our specialists couldn't solve. Lara crossed her arms. Do you want me to explain it to impress your engineers, or to make sure I didn't copy it from somewhere? Ethan didn't bat an eye. To understand your reasoning. She looked around. There was something theatrical about the situation. A cleaning worker without a university degree facing a team of doctors, programmers, and international specialists, and all of them, curiously, waiting to hear her. All right, she said, stepping forward. But I warn you now, I think better if I hold a feather duster. Some muffled laughter was heard in the room. Ethan looked around, controlling the atmosphere with just a raised eyebrow. Silence returned. Lara pointed to the whiteboard, where the equation remained just as she had left it the night before. This, she began, is an optimization equation that involves neural network feedback. But someone decided to overcomplicate the structure. They put unnecessary layers and forgot the basics. It's like building a 20-story building and forgetting the foundations. The company's technical director, a gray-haired man with thin-rimmed glasses named Dr. Howard Lang, adjusted his glasses and approached slowly. It's correct, he said, looking at the screen. The solution presented by Lara solves the branching error that was blocking the learning system. I checked it 3 times this morning. She did it perfectly. A new murmur spread through the room. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on Lara. And how exactly did you understand all this? without having access to the project data. I've cleaned this floor for months. When someone leaves the whiteboard microphone on or talks too loudly, you hear things. And since I like math more than soap operas, I put the pieces together. So, you were spying on our team? An engineer blurted out suspiciously. Spying? Please, she replied with a slight smile. If I wanted to do industrial espionage, I wouldn't be wearing these ripped sneakers. This time, even Ethan had to contain a reaction. Ms. Rodriguez, he continued, regaining control, given the clarity and effectiveness of your reasoning and the technical team's verification, I would like to invite you to collaborate with us on this project, on a temporary basis. Lara raised an eyebrow. Collaborate how? A kind of observation assistant, Ethan replied, as if inventing the term on the spot. Observation assistant, she repeated, thoughtfully. Does that mean I sit in a corner quietly, watching the geniuses argue about who messed up the calculation again? You can give your opinion, but you'll primarily be there to help us understand your approach and perspective. Lara was silent for a moment. The atmosphere was tense, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her answer. She looked at the group of suited men in front of her, all waiting for a yes or crossing their fingers for a no. I accept, she finally said. Before they could react with relief, she added, but with two conditions. Ethan's lips parted, surprised. No one imposed conditions on him. What would they be? First, I'm going to keep wearing my cleaning uniform, even in meetings. A murmur of surprise was heard in the room. Some of the team members looked at each other uncomfortably. Why? Ethan asked. Because if I come here in heels and a suit, you'll think I changed. And I haven't changed. I just received a strange invitation. I prefer to keep my feet on the ground, even if they're full of holes. He listened slowly, still trying to understand if that was a bluff or pure conviction. And the second condition? I want to have my cleaning cart nearby. That's where I keep my lunch and my good mood. This time, laughter in the room was inevitable. Even Howard Lang let out a slight. Pfft. Ethan was silent for a few seconds. Then he replied, I accept the conditions. Perfect, she said. Just don't ask me to wear a suit, lest I get an allergy to luxury. The meeting ended with more eyes on Lara than on any graph or projection. She had entered the room as a janitor, and left as, well, a janitor, but now with the title of informal and unpredictable collaborator on the company's most important project. As she left, a young engineer caught up with her in the hallway. Hey Lara, how did you know about that logical inversion? I figured the system was trying to predict something that hadn't happened yet, and I remembered something my sister once said, you can't make rice without fire. Sounds silly, but it made sense. The engineer looked at her, confused. Lara winked and continued walking with her cart. Ethan, from the other side of the glass, saw everything. There was something about that woman that defied his cold logic and well-ordered charts. She spoke in food metaphors, wore worn shoes, and yet found meaning where 20 specialists had failed. He knew something had changed, not in the project, but in himself. And for the first time in years, he found himself thinking about their next encounter. In the following days, Lara Rodriguez's presence at Smith Tech meetings went from being a rarity to something indispensable. She still wore her blue uniform, with the cleaning team logo embroidered on the pocket, but now she sat in one of the chairs around the conference table, with a small water bottle in one hand and a worn notebook in the other. At first, the engineers spoke slowly near her, as if afraid that every word might sound like a mistake. But little by little, they realized that Lara didn't want to correct anyone. She just asked simple questions, sometimes so direct that they dismantled weeks of tangled ideas. What if the system isn't failing, But responding incorrectly because the question is wrong? She suggested during a meeting about the AI interface. One of the specialists was silent for several seconds, then murmured, "That makes a lot of sense." Lara's ideas emerged between sips of coffee and funny comments about the colorful charts in the presentations. She didn't use complicated technical terms or cite impressive formulas, but she saw patterns where others only saw noise. Ethan Smith observed it all from a distance. He spoke little in meetings where she was present and maintained his habit of sitting at the end of the table, reading reports with his usual serious expression. But inside, he was conflicted. It was as if every move Lara made unsettled him. She literally talked to the office plants. Once, walking down the hallway, he heard her tell a small cactus, "If you manage to survive in here, you deserve to be a manager." Ethan caught himself smiling alone. On another occasion, she dropped a marker on the floor and, as she bent down to pick it up, casually commented, "This floor is cleaner than many consciences around here." The whole room laughed, even the project director. Little by little, Ethan began to notice things he had never seen, like the way she tilted her head when thinking, how she made notes with little drawings beside them, flowers, clouds, happy faces, or the way she looked at him, not with admiration or fear like many other employees, but with a mixture of curiosity and challenge, as if silently saying, "You don't intimidate me." It was disconcerting. That Thursday, Richard stopped by Lara's area at the end of the workday with an unexpected invitation. "Tomorrow night, there's a team dinner at an Italian restaurant nearby. Nothing formal. It'll be good to relax and celebrate the project's progress." Lara, who was finishing tidying up projector cables in the conference room, looked at him in surprise. "A team dinner? With me? Of course, you're part of the team now." She hesitated. "But I don't have fancy clothes for a dinner." "It's not fancy. It's just an informal gathering. Come as you are," Richard replied, smiling. That night at home, Lara told her sister Camila the news while they ate shredded chicken and rice for dinner. "They invited you to dinner? Can you believe it? Were you going to go in your cleaning uniform?" Lara laughed. "Not this time. I promised to try to look less functional." Camila disappeared into her room and returned minutes later with a light, soft fabric, red strapless dress. "Wear this. It's the prettiest I have. It'll make you look powerful." Powerful is a stretch, but thanks. The next night, the Italian restaurant chosen by the team was small, charming, and lit with filament bulbs hanging from the ceiling like droplets of light. Lara arrived alone, a few minutes after the agreed time. She wore the borrowed red dress and a pair of flat sandals. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a little lipstick, the only one she had, borrowed from her sister. As soon as she entered the room, several glances turned towards her. Some of the team members looked at her for several seconds without recognizing her. One of the project managers whispered something to his colleague. "Is that the new investor?" "Investor?" "Yes. Isn't this girl Lara?" Richard was the first to see her and stood up, surprised. "Lara, you look different. Very good." She smiled shyly. "Thanks." The blue uniform took the day off. She walked confidently to the table, where some still looked at her with admiration and bewilderment. A waiter quickly approached. "Would you like the menu, miss?" "Bring me what everyone else is eating, as long as it doesn't have seafood. My stomach is very dramatic." The group burst out laughing. Ethan arrived a few minutes later. He wore a dark shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a light jacket. As soon as he entered and saw Lara, he stopped in the middle of the room. He said nothing. He just watched her for a moment. She was sitting between two engineers, telling a story about a client who tried to pay for a cappuccino with a theater ticket. Laughter flowed easily. Ethan felt a pang in his chest that he couldn't name. When he approached the table, Lara turned naturally. "Good evening, boss. Have a seat. There's still bread in the basket." "Good evening," he replied, carefully pulling out a chair. During dinner, Lara didn't dominate the conversation, but she didn't stay quiet either. She was spontaneous, funny, made comments that provoked laughter, and maintained a light tone even when they talked about algorithms and performance. At one point, the waiter dropped a utensil beside her and apologized. "No problem," she said. "I've cleaned up much worse things than a rebellious fork." The table laughed again. Ethan, sitting on the other side, pretended to look at the menu, but he couldn't stop observing her. There was something unsettling about seeing her like this. It wasn't the dress or the lipstick. It was the sparkle in her eyes, her naturalness, the fact that she wasn't trying to fit in. She simply was. When dinner ended and groups began to say goodbye, Lara thanked everyone for the evening. "Truly, thank you. I had a lot of fun, but I'm leaving now before the pumpkin turns into a mop." Richard let out a brief laugh. "I hope you come more often." Ethan accompanied her to the sidewalk. "It's late. Do you want me to call you a car?" "No need. I'm taking the subway. I know the way with my eyes closed." He nodded. He was silent for a few seconds. The atmosphere between the two had changed. It was no longer awkwardness. It was a pause. "You look different today." "It's the dress. It has magic. You almost made everyone believe I was someone else. For a moment, everyone thought you were a new investor." Lara let out a sincere laugh. "And to think this all started with a formula scribbled on a dirty whiteboard, and by a woman who saw what no one else saw," he completed. She bit her lip for an instant, unsure how to respond. Then she adjusted her purse strap over her shoulder and looked up at the sky. "Good night, Ethan. Good night, Lara." She walked away, and Ethan remained standing there, watching, the red dress disappearing around the corner, the soft sound of her footsteps, the trace of her presence still lingering in the air. That night he didn't return to the office. He went straight home, but even lying in his bed with imported sheets, his thoughts revolved around a smile and a metaphor about rice and fire. Friday started hectically at Smith Tech. The development team was working against the clock to integrate the new AI functionality before Monday's investor meeting. The upper floors had an atmosphere of contained tension, with tablets blasting notifications, cables on the floor, and people walking around with coffee cups in hand, as if they were an extension of their own arm. Lara Rodriguez arrived on the 38th floor with her cleaning cart, which now looked more like an Epuisa's improvised idea hub. When Richard called her for a quick chat on the executive floor, "The team wants your opinion on an anomaly that arose in the latest simulations," he said in his usual kind tone. Lara nodded, adjusted her bun with one hand, and entered the elevator. Destination, 40th floor. One of the buttons blinked orange, but no one paid much attention. What she didn't expect was that, at the last second, someone quickly entered before the doors closed. Ethan Smith, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, tablet in hand, concentrated expression, gave a slight nod, and Lara responded with a brief smile. The elevator went up 2 floors without a problem, but between the 39th and 40th, there was a click, a sudden jolt, and the movement stopped. "Wow," Lara murmured. "Was that staged or real?" The emergency lights came on. The digital panel went blank and then displayed an error symbol. Ethan pressed the alarm button. "Nothing. The elevator stopped," he said, as if stating an undeniable fact. Lara looked up and then at the floor. "How wonderful! My first day without the squeegee and I'm stuck in a fishbowl with you. Sorry, no, just trying to keep my spirits up. I'm scared of very confined spaces." He tried to use the intercom. No response. He took out his cell phone. No signal. Lara leaned against the padded wall and crossed her arms. "It must be a problem with the electrical grid. It happens sometimes in the old building where I live. Only there it's fixed with a flashlight and a little push to the gate." Ethan was silent, trying to rationalize the situation. Someone will notice we're trapped. Security monitors the elevators. I hope it's not the same guy who falls asleep on the night shift, because if it is, we're stuck until tomorrow. He looked at her, not with impatience, but with surprise. Do you always joke in risky situations? Only when I'm with someone more stressed than me. A few minutes passed in silence. The space began to feel warmer. Lara took off the light sweater she was wearing over her uniform and fanned herself with her badge. "You know what's curious?" she said. "I've worked cleaning hallways with rats in the pipes, bathrooms without light, and even a bus station at night. But it's here, in the city's most technological building, where I get stuck in an elevator." "Life's ironies," Ethan replied. She observed him for a moment. He seemed uncomfortable, but not exactly because of the elevator. It was as if he was fighting a deeper, invisible discomfort. "You're not good at letting things out of your control, are you?" He looked away for an instant. "I don't like unforeseen events." Nobody likes them, but they happen. Not when you plan well. Planning doesn't stop life from being stubborn. He looked at her as if that phrase had touched some memory. "You talk like someone who's had to deal with a lot of difficult things, and you talk like someone who tried to solve everything alone." Silence returned, but this time it felt less tense. Lara sat on the floor, leaning against the padded wall. "You can sit too. The floor is clean. I cleaned it myself yesterday." He hesitated, but then sat beside her, keeping some distance. "When I was a kid," he began unprompted, "my father used to say that emotions are distractions, that those who feel too much lose focus." She slowly turned her face. "And you believed him?" "For a while. He was a tough, demanding man. He believed that success was a result of discipline and coldness. I grew up hearing that if I wanted to reach the top, I had to cut off everything that made me vulnerable." "And you cut it?" "Almost everything." She remained silent, just listening. "Sometimes I think I no longer know how to feel certain things, as if I had erased a part of myself." "I don't think anyone erases anything, Ethan. We just push it into a hidden corner." He looked at her for a few seconds. "And you? What corner of life brought you here?" She sighed, looking at the ceiling. "My mom got sick when I was in my second year of university. I had to drop everything to take care of her and my sister, Camila. I worked whatever jobs I could. Bakery, gas station, cafeteria. Cleaning came up because a friend recommended it to me, and I never let it go." "I'm so sorry." "No need, I'm grateful. I've learned more scrubbing floors than in many books." Ethan smiled faintly. It was rare. "And your sister?" "She's about to finish high school. She dreams of being a biologist. I want to see her get into university. That's why I work so hard. 2 jobs, few minutes of rest, but a lot of hope." He looked down, thoughtful. "You have more clarity of purpose than most people who work here." "I have what life gave me. I didn't choose the easy path, but I'm making it my path." A few more minutes passed. The air inside the elevator felt warmer, but also lighter. Lara looked at Ethan and smiled. "Who would have thought, huh? The 2 of us trapped here. Sounds like a movie script." "What genre?" "Drama with touches of comedy, or comedy with a dramatic background. Depends on how it ends." He laughed, a true relaxed laugh. "You baffle me." "That's good. It means there are still things in you that aren't programmed." They looked at each other for a few seconds. The distance between them had shortened. A comfortable silence settled. His eyes sought hers with more intention. She, without noticing, moved a little closer. For a moment, everything was calm. The emergency light softly illuminated their faces. He raised his hand slowly, as if time was moving slower. Their faces almost touched, but then a click. The elevator shook. The lights flickered, and the digital panel lit up with a 40. The cabin rose half a meter and stopped. A beep was heard. "System restored," a metallic voice said over the intercom. Instinctively, they separated. Ethan stood up first and offered her his hand to help her. "Shall we go?" She took his hand with a slight smile. "Let's go." Before fate could change its mind, the doors opened. The hallway was empty. They walked out together, side by side, in silence. But what happened in there would not remain trapped in the elevator. The next morning, everything seemed to be normal at Smith Tech headquarters in the heart of Mexico City. Laura was more focused than ever. She arrived punctually at meetings, avoided jokes, and maintained total focus on codes and technical discussions, as if she wanted to prove to herself and to everyone that she wasn't there by accident. But it only took a notification on an intern's cell phone for everything to spiral out of control. "Hey, have you seen this?" he mumbled, showing his phone to a colleague. The headline, in huge letters, on a corporate gossip site, read, "Smith Tech's multi-million-dollar project includes a janitor." Below the headline, a photo of Laura sitting in a meeting in her navy blue cleaning uniform. The caption featured cruel terms: "Untitled Latina," "Curiosity or marketing strategy," "Millionaire CEO bets on popular wisdom to solve AI flaws." Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. First on internal employee networks, then in tech forums, and soon in national media. Laura became a meme, a joke, news, and a topic of debate. Comments flooded the posts. Is it serious that a janitor now solves equations? Meritocracy is dead. It must be a Smith Tech marketing campaign. There's no other explanation. What's next? Street sweepers at NASA? I'd rather be served by an algorithm than a cleaner, Laura found out from her sister Camila, who called her upset. "They're talking about you everywhere, sis. They're making fun, inventing things. They say you're there because you're pretty or because of the CEO." Laura felt a knot in her throat, not from the exposure, but from the cruelty of the words. She took a deep breath and told her sister that everything was fine, though she knew it wasn't. Minutes later, the area phone rang. It was Richard, asking her to come up to Ethan's office. Upstairs, the atmosphere was tense. Ethan was standing, holding a tablet and reading the headlines. Richard, beside him, looked more worried than ever. "Laura," Ethan began directly, "I've already contacted the legal department. We're going to issue an official statement denying any offensive insinuations and reaffirming your technical contribution. We're also asking platforms to remove the false information." "I didn't ask for any of that," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I know, but I want to protect you." She looked up, not with anger, but with clarity. "You don't need to protect me, Ethan. You need to respect me." He was silent. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop in that glass-walled room overlooking the city. "Respect that I'm not a system error," she continued, "nor an anomaly, nor a marketing strategy. I'm just someone who knows how to think, someone who saw an opportunity and took it, and I'm not going to hide because of it." Richard cleared his throat, almost as a sign of support. Ethan dropped the tablet onto the table and ran his hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Not with her, but with the whole situation. "I didn't want this to happen. The exposure, the attacks, that was never part of the plan." "And you think it was for me?" He took a step back. Her tone remained firm, but without losing control. "I came here thinking I was going to clean floors, as always, that I was going to go unnoticed. And now, because of an equation, it seems I'm a phenomenon. But you know what? I'd rather be called the cleaning lady who thinks than live hidden, pretending I've never used a squeegee in my life. Ethan didn't respond. He just looked at her as someone seeing, for the first time, something they don't know how to name. "And one more thing," she said, already turning to leave. "You can have 1,000 algorithms running in your system, but I have a sister, a mom, and a lot of people who still believe it's worth trying." Even if they make fun, even if they laugh, she left the room, leaving only the sound of the air conditioning filling the silence. The next day, Lara didn't show up, nor the day after. Richard tried calling her. No answer. Ethan sent a short message. "Are you okay?" Nothing. On the third day, the hallways of Smith Tech felt quieter. Lara's chair in the boardroom was empty. The engineers looked at it as if expecting a presence that was now noticeably absent. "It's impressive," a data analyst commented softly. "How did she become a part of this so quickly?" Ethan remained silent during meetings. He reviewed spreadsheets with more coldness than usual. Even the graphs seemed to have lost color. At night, he stayed late at the company. He walked through the hallways, passed by the room where she used to sit, saw her forgotten notebook on the table. There were colorful drawings, loose phrases, and a list with the scribbled title, "Things I Still Want to Do." Take Camila to see the ocean, learn to make foamy coffee, buy new sneakers, finish that book on the shelf. Be heard. Really? Ethan carefully closed the notebook. He sat in her chair. He looked out the window at the lights of Mexico City. A living, intense city. Full of noise, but also of stories no one sees. Like hers. Lara's absence had left a greater void than he imagined. Not only were her creative ideas missing, her practical logic, her laughter, simplicity, and the courage to say what no one else dared were missing. She was missing. Her. And yet, it was Ethan who felt it the most. Not that he said it, or showed it in his upright posture or measured voice, but it was enough to observe the time he spent looking out the boardroom window or the long minutes he stood in front of the whiteboard without really seeing what was projected. On the fourth day without news, Ethan made a decision he didn't fully understand himself. He asked Richard for Lara's address, saying only that he needed to clarify some things. "Are you sure?" Richard asked, as he handed him the paper with the address written on it. "I've never been so sure of a doubt," Ethan replied, putting the paper in his pocket. The neighborhood was simple but clean. Low-rise buildings with balconies full of plants and children playing on the sidewalks. The kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors' names, where life moves at a slower but much more real pace. Ethan got out of his car just before 5 p.m. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a light shirt and dress pants, still elegant, but curiously less armored. He rang the doorbell of apartment 104. The door was opened by a woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and attentive eyes behind simple glasses. "Good afternoon. You are—" "Ethan Smith. I'm Lara's boss, or at least I was." The woman looked him up and down, measuring every inch of his presence. "Come in." The apartment was small, cozy, with the smell of fresh coffee and floral cushions on the couch. Old photos adorned the shelf, and a fan spun slowly in a corner of the living room. "I'm Dolores, Lara's mom. Camila is in her room studying, and Lara is in the kitchen, thinking about life as she herself said this morning." Ethan barely smiled. "Can I talk to her?" "You can, but calmly. She's made of strength, but also of disappointments." He thanked her and went to the kitchen. He found Lara standing, with her back to him, carefully cutting bread. Her hair was pulled back haphazardly, a baggy t-shirt and sandals. None of that figure that could silence a boardroom with just a phrase. She turned slowly, surprised, but not frightened. "Ethan? Hello, how did you find me?" "Richard had to be convinced and promised that I wasn't coming to offer you a contract." She smiled for the first time in days. "Do you want some coffee?" "I'd love some." They sat at the small table. Ethan looked around, noticing the details. The shiny glass jars, the handwritten recipes on the refrigerator door, the school books open on the coffee table. "Camila?" "Yes." "Biology exam tomorrow." "And your mom?" "She's amazing." "She is. She doesn't let us forget who we are, even if the whole world wants to erase it." There was a brief, quiet silence. Ethan held the cup with both hands before speaking. "I didn't come here as a director. I came as someone who misses your presence." Lara looked at him sincerely. "You miss my ideas? Your ways of seeing things, your way of treating people, and what you made me realize about myself." She looked away. "All that. The comments, the jokes, the mockery. I didn't know it hurt so much to be visible. I should have foreseen it, protected you better." "No." She looked up, firm. "I just needed respect, and you understood it." "That's a start." He took a deep breath. "I need you to come back, not as a piece of the system, but as you are, with freedom, with a voice. The company needs you, and so do I." She was silent for a moment. Then she stood up, went to the refrigerator, took a glass of water, and returned with a softer gaze. "You have an important presentation tomorrow, right?" "Yes, international investors. They want to see how the system responds with human intervention. And without you, the team is lost." "Then maybe it's time to show that human intervention can come from anywhere." He looked at her intently. "Does that mean what?" "That tomorrow I'll be there, but with one condition." "Which one?" "I want Camila to be present." Sitting in the front row. The next morning, Smith Tech breathed again. Lara entered the building as if she knew every inch of it. She wore her usual uniform, her hair tied up with a pen, and her notebook in hand. But her gaze was different, more determined. Richard almost hugged her when he saw her. "I thought we had lost you." "I just went to get some air. Now I'm ready to swim again." Ethan, upon seeing her, simply nodded, a subtle gesture. But in his eyes, there was something new, something only she could understand. In the presentation room, a group of investors waited in elegant armchairs. People from Silicon Valley, from Europe, from Japan. LED screens showed real-time graphics, all carefully prepared. Lara entered with calm steps. Beside her, Ethan and Richard. In the first row, Ichishio as agreed, a reserved seat. Camila was there, her eyes shining. Ethan gave the formal presentation, explaining the project objectives. Then he handed the microphone to Lara. "Good morning," she said, looking at the audience naturally. "I'm Lara Rodriguez. Perhaps some of you have already heard my name in places that don't truly explain who I am. But today, you will hear me from here." A slight murmur was heard. "I don't have an MBA or international titles, but I know how to look at a problem and ask, what is it for?" She pointed to the screen. "The system you are seeing was stuck for weeks due to a simple flaw. A logic that got lost amidst too much logic. Sometimes, the solution isn't in knowing more, it's in looking differently." She walked across the stage as one walks down their street. Confident, serene, clear. "I've worked cleaning this building for almost 2 years. I know every corner, every voice that echoes at night. I've learned much more by listening than by trying to shine. And that taught me that knowledge doesn't have a badge, it has practice." The investors listened attentively. Some took notes, others simply smiled. Lara closed with a quick demonstration of the AI solving a problem, with parameters she herself had suggested. Clear language, simple questions, data organized by emotional priority. The system responded in seconds. The room applauded. Camilla covered her face, emotional. Dolores in the background, discreetly wiping her eyes. Ethan looked at Lara with pride, but more than that, with admiration. At the end of the presentation, one of the Japanese investors approached. "Mr. Smith, your assistant is brilliant. You have something here that the world needs to know." Ethan replied without hesitation. "She is not my assistant. She is Lara Rodriguez, and she is part of the team." Hours later, the contract was signed. A multi-million-dollar investment sealed with a firm handshake and the most genuine smile Lara had given in her life. When it was all over, she returned to the technical floor, took off her shoes for a moment, and took a deep breath. Richard walked by her with 2 coffees, one to celebrate and another to continue. "Thanks," she said, "but the second one is for the cactus at the reception. It survived all this with me." Ethan watched her from afar. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger. The afternoon following the big presentation, Smith Tech seemed like a different company. For the first time in months, the hallways were filled with genuine smiles and laughter that didn't sound forced. Employees greeted each other with enthusiasm, and even the most serious members of the engineering team walked lighter, as if an invisible weight had lifted from the atmosphere. The signing of the multi-million-dollar contract with the investors was the highlight of a historic day. But everyone knew that the great protagonist of the change had a name: Lara Rodriguez. Richard came up with the idea for a celebration. Nothing formal, just a well-deserved break. The break room on the 40th floor was quickly decorated with colorful balloons, a table with Mexican snacks, sodas, and a cake with blue frosting letters that spelled "Thank you, Lara." Lara tried to protest when she saw her name on the cake, but it was too late. Her colleagues applauded, and even Howard, the always serious head of the AI department, showed up with a hat on his arm just to make the inside joke make sense. "You saved us with coffee, logic, and good humor," he told her, handing her a slice of cake. "You deserve every bite." Camila and Dolores were also there, discreetly in a corner, with proud smiles. Camila was recording everything to send to her school group. Lara tried to hide her blush with gentle jokes as always, but ever since she entered, her eyes had been searching for something or someone. Ethan still hadn't arrived. 40 minutes later, when most of the team was already saying goodbye, he appeared, without his jacket, with his sleeves rolled up and a calm gaze. For the first time, he didn't seem to be carrying the entire company on his shoulders. "I thought you weren't coming," Lara said, with a glass of juice in her hand. "I thought I wasn't invited," he replied. "Are you serious?" "Almost never, but today, maybe so." She let out a low laugh. That was something new. The two approached the glass bar by the window, where a few empanadas and disposable cups remained. The room gradually emptied, until only the two of them were left, side by side, with Mexico City lit up in the background, like the backdrop of an unexpectedly quiet night. "I didn't know you knew how to smile in public," Lara said, taking an empanada. "I just found out recently. Apparently it doesn't hurt, and it suits you. You should do it more often." He looked at her hair slightly disheveled, her contained smile, her hands marked by work and dignity. For some reason, she seemed even more beautiful when she wasn't trying to impress. "You're different," he commented. "Again with the red dress? No, seriously, you're firmer, more yourself." She shrugged, taking another glass of juice. After becoming a meme, being judged by the whole country, and returning to the same room with my head held high, I think I gained a new layer of skin. He felt it, with a slight smile. Do you have any idea how much you inspired everyone here? I just tried not to faint in the middle of the presentation. Both laughed. Then a quiet silence fell. Outside, the city pulsed with distant horns and car lights. Inside, there were only two worlds slowly drawing closer. Lara, Ethan said, his voice a little softer. I wanted to say this before, but thank you for what you did, for what you faced, for not giving up. You too, she replied, surprised by the tenderness in his words. Thank you for coming to find me. I wouldn't have come back alone. His eyes met hers. There was something there, something that even the most complex algorithms couldn't calculate. They looked at each other for long seconds, as if time had stopped. And now, she whispered, now, we see where this takes us. She didn't answer, but her eyes said it all. One step, then another. They were close, so close they could hear each other's breathing. The world seemed suspended in the few centimeters that still separated them. And then it happened. A kiss, soft at first like a shared secret, then firmer, as if they wanted to erase all the lost time. Neither planned it, neither backed down. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, but inside, the universe had stopped. The next morning, Lara woke up earlier than usual. Her heart was still dancing to the rhythm of the previous night. The kiss with Ethan remained etched in her memory with such clarity that it made her smile unintentionally. She put on her uniform with more lightness, adjusted her usual bun, and left the house with confident steps. But upon arriving at Smith Tech, something was different. Ethan walked past her in the hallway and only gave a vague greeting without saying a word. Not a comment, not a long glance. Nothing. During the meeting, he was direct, technical, and didn't even look at her. Lara tried to convince herself that he was just concentrated, perhaps tense about the next stages of the project. But the day passed, and nothing changed. The second day was even worse. He avoided all contact. If she entered the boardroom, he already had his eyes glued to his tablet. If she went out for coffee, he didn't even move. There wasn't even a good morning. Lara tried not to show it. She continued to contribute ideas, maintained a light tone in conversations with colleagues. She smiled when necessary, but inside, she felt like someone who had been cast aside without explanation. On the night of the second day, while organizing her papers in the support room, a habit she never abandoned, Lara sat in the chair and looked at the reflection of the city lights on the glass. She took a deep breath. She knew how to recognize when someone was pulling away. And more than that, she knew when something was beginning to fade. On the morning of the third day, Ethan arrived as always, punctual, serious, controlled. But as he entered the boardroom, he saw something different. On Lara's chair was a craft paper envelope. He approached carefully. Inside was a simple, handwritten note. Ethan, thank you for everything. For the opportunities, for the talks, for the difficult stairs you helped me climb. But the time has come to go down. Not because I'm weak, but because I know my worth. And who knows, maybe out there, that value will be better received. Lara. He stood there, reading those lines, as if each word weighed double. He folded the note carefully and sat in the chair. For the first time in a long time, he felt that the silence hurt. She was gone, and he had let her go. The days that followed Lara's departure from Smith Tech were like a series of faded photographs for Ethan Smith. Each morning he arrived with the same mechanical routine: black coffee, reports, endless meetings, and a growing feeling that something fundamental had been ripped from his professional and personal life. The empty chair in the conference room had become a constant reminder. The engineers tried to fill the void with their technical analyses, but something essential was missing, that unique perspective that turned complex problems into simple solutions, with a humor that made even the most tense meetings bearable. Richard noticed the change immediately. Ethan was more distant, colder than ever. His answers were short, his smiles non-existent. It was as if he had returned to an earlier version of himself, but worse. Now he knew exactly what he was losing. On the 5th day after Laura's departure, Ethan finally gave in to the impulse he had been suppressing. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. He hung up without leaving a message. He tried again the next day. Same result. And the next. Silence. With each unanswered call, Ethan's frustration grew. Not with her, but with himself. He knew perfectly well why Laura wasn't answering. He knew his own self-destructive patterns so well that he couldn't ignore what he had done. At the moment when he should have gotten closer, he had pulled away. Just when she needed clarity, he offered confusion. On Monday of the following week, Ethan made a decision that even surprised Richard. He canceled all his afternoon meetings and headed to the neighborhood where Laura lived. The drive took 40 minutes through heavy Mexico City traffic, enough time to mentally rehearse at least 10 different versions of the conversation he hoped to have. Apartment 104 was just as he remembered it. Flowers in the windows, children playing in the courtyard, the familiar scent of home-cooked food floating in the air. Ethan took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Dolores opened the door with the same attentive gaze as before, but this time her expression held a protective coolness that he recognized instantly. "Mr. Smith," she said, without inviting him in. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Dolores. I'd like to speak with Laura, please." The woman observed him for several seconds, as if she could read his intentions just by seeing him standing there. "She's not here. Do you know when she'll be back?" "I don't know. She left early and didn't say when she'd be back." Ethan understood he was being politely dismissed, but he insisted. "Could I leave a message for her? It's important." Dolores crossed her arms, then turned her head towards the apartment. Ethan heard footsteps and a familiar voice whispering something in Spanish. His heart quickened as he recognized the tone, even though he didn't understand the words. Dolores replied in a low voice and then looked back at him. "As I told you, she's not here." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken message. Laura was there, but she didn't want to see him, and her mother, like any good mother, was protecting her daughter from a conversation she was clearly not ready for. "I understand," he said, taking a step back. "Please, just tell her I came, and that I'm very sorry." Dolores maintained her serious demeanor, but something in her gaze softened a little. "I'll tell her." In the following days, Smith Tech received news that should have been a cause for celebration. The company had been invited to present its AI system at the Latin American International Technology Congress, the most prestigious event in the sector in the region. It would be held at the Modern Convention Center in Mexico City, with the presence of technology leaders from all over the world. Ethan would be the main speaker, representing not only Smith Tech, but all Mexican innovation in artificial intelligence. It was the kind of recognition any director would dream of receiving. But for him, the honor felt empty without the person who truly deserved to be on stage beside him. It was then that Richard suggested something that at first seemed impossible. "Why don't you invite Laura?" he said during a preparation meeting. "She's part of this achievement. It would be fair for her to be present." "She won't want to come," Ethan replied, distractedly moving papers on the table. "How do you know if you don't try?" Ethan thought about it for the rest of the day. Finally, the night before the event, he decided to make one last attempt. But instead of calling or showing up at her house again, he chose something different. He wrote a letter. A real letter, handwritten, on company paper. Not a formal email or an impersonal message. Something tangible that she could hold, read, and reread if she wanted. Lara started. I know I have no right to ask for anything after how I acted. I know I hurt you when I should have been clear about what I felt. But there's something I need you to know. Tomorrow at the International Technology Congress, I'm going to present our system to the world. I'm going to talk about innovation, about how technology can change lives, about the future of artificial intelligence in Latin America. But all of this started with you. Your logic, your way of seeing things, your courage to find solutions where others only saw problems. You transformed not only the project, but the company. And you transformed me too. That's why I would like you to be there, not as a guest or an employee, but as the true protagonist of this story. The event is tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the convention center. There will be a ticket reserved in your name at the reception, should you decide to go. I will understand if you choose not to attend, but I needed you to know that you will be remembered and honored, regardless of your decision. With respect and admiration, Ethan. He carefully folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and asked a messenger to deliver it in person to Lara's house. The next day, an elegant crowd gathered at the impressive convention center in Mexico City. The main auditorium, with a capacity for 2,000 people, was full. Businessmen, investors, specialized journalists, students, and technology professionals from all over Latin America occupied the seats arranged in perfect rows. The stage was impressive. Giant LED screens, professional lighting, and a modern lectern that seemed to float above the polished wooden floor. Flags of various countries decorated the sides, and simultaneous translators worked in glass booths at the ends of the auditorium. At home, Lara held Ethan's letter for the third time that day. She had read every word repeatedly, analyzing each phrase as if it were a code to decipher. Camila sat beside her on the couch, watching the live broadcast of the event on television. Should you go? Her sister said for the 5th time. That's yours too. Not anymore, Lara replied, folding the letter again. I left, remember? But you didn't leave his heart. Lara looked at her with a doubtful expression. How can you be so sure? Because no one writes a letter like that out of obligation, and because you haven't taken him out of your heart either. On television, the event host announced the entrance of the main speaker. Ethan appeared on stage impeccably dressed, in a dark suit that highlighted his elegant bearing. But even through the screen, Lara noticed something different in his expression, a tension she had never seen in him. Ethan approached the lectern, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the audience. 2,000 people awaited his words. Television cameras broadcast live to millions of viewers throughout Latin America. It was the most important moment of his career, and he remained silent. Good afternoon, he began, his voice slightly trembling. My name is Ethan Smith, and I represent Smith Tech. He paused. He looked at the giant screens displaying graphs and data from the AI system. He took a deep breath and tried to continue. Our company has developed a revolutionary system that... Silence. A total silence that stretched for eternal seconds. Murmurs began among the audience. The cameras focused on his face, capturing every sign of nervousness. Lara stood up from the sofa as if an invisible force had pushed her. Where are you going? Camila asked. To do something silly, Lara replied as she grabbed the car keys. The convention center was 20 minutes from her house with normal traffic. Lara made the trip in 12, driving with a determination that surprised even herself. Upon arriving at the parking lot, she ran to the main entrance and headed to the reception. "I have a reserved ticket. Lara Rodriguez." The receptionist checked the system and smiled. "Here you are, miss. Main auditorium. Zone." Lara ran into the auditorium. On stage, Ethan was still struggling with words that wouldn't come out. Sweat began to form small drops on his forehead. The audience was visibly uncomfortable. Without hesitation, Lara walked down one side of the auditorium. She passed through the security area, which recognized her from newspaper photos, and discreetly ascended the stage by the side stairs. Some guards tried to stop her, but she gestured, indicating that she knew the speaker. Ethan saw her approach and widened his eyes in surprise. For a moment, he thought he was imagining things. Lara walked toward him with a firm step, completely ignoring the 2,000 people who were now looking at her in total silence. She leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Remember when you said formulas don't have a heart? Well, maybe it's time to show that CEOs do." It was a reference to a conversation weeks ago when they discussed the difference between cold data and human intuition, an inside joke that only the two of them understood. Ethan turned his head towards her, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. A sincere, relieved, almost childlike smile. The tension in his shoulders disappeared instantly. He turned to the microphone with newfound confidence. "Excuse me," he said to the audience. "Sometimes we need to remember that behind every revolutionary technology there is a human story. And this story began in a very special way." And then, Ethan gave the best presentation of his life. He spoke about how Smith Tech's most important innovation didn't come from high-tech laboratories or highly credentialed experts, but from a simple, honest perspective of someone who saw beyond unnecessary complications. He spoke about Lara without mentioning her name at first, describing her as a collaborator who transformed not only the project, but the entire philosophy of the company. He explained how true artificial intelligence should combine the precision of algorithms with human wisdom, that the best systems not only process data, but also understand contexts, emotions, and people's real needs. The audience was completely attentive. Ethan spoke with a passion and clarity that turned a technical presentation into an inspiring story about innovation, teamwork, and the value of different ways of seeing the world. When he finally introduced Lara as the true mind behind this revolution, the auditorium erupted in applause. People spontaneously stood up, creating an ovation that lasted more than 3 minutes. Lara, who had remained discreetly at the side of the stage throughout the presentation, timidly waved to the audience. Her face was flushed, but her eyes shone with pride, not only for her, but also for Ethan, who had finally found his most sincere voice. When the applause finally subsided and the auditorium lights came on, Ethan descended from the stage and went directly to where Lara was standing. "You came?" he said, still surprised by her presence. "Someone once told me that teams work best when all the elements are present," she replied, with a soft smile. He led her to a quieter area behind the stage, away from the cameras and the crowd that was approaching to congratulate them. "Lara, I need to tell you something," he began, gently taking her arm. "You're the only person who has made me want to be less of a CEO and more human." She looked into his eyes, seeing in them a vulnerability he had never shown before. "And you're the first person who made me believe I can be more than everyone expects of me," she replied. They stood there amidst the distant noise of people leaving, looking at each other as if they finally saw something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to be recognized. 2 weeks after the resounding success of the international conference, life at Smith Tech had taken on a completely new dimension. The company's artificial intelligence project had become a global benchmark, and collaboration proposals arrived daily from companies in Silicon Valley, Europe, and Asia. The media, which had previously mocked Lara, now treated her as a misunderstood visionary who had revolutionized the technological sector. But in the midst of so much recognition, there was something that deeply troubled Lara. She found herself at a crossroads she had not foreseen. On the one hand, professional success that exceeded even her most ambitious dreams. On the other, a growing need to discover who she really was, away from the spotlights and the expectations that now weighed on her shoulders. During meetings at Smith Tech, Lara noticed how everyone now hung on her every word. The same engineers who at first looked at her with distrust now turned to her even for the smallest decisions. Journalists requested interviews every week. Universities sent invitations to give lectures. It was gratifying, yes, but also exhausting. Ethan, for his part, had completely changed his attitude towards her and the work. In meetings, he consulted her openly, valued her opinions, and showed a more human side that surprised all employees. It was as if the conference had broken an internal barrier he had held for years. However, despite this new professional harmony and the moments of complicity they shared, Lara felt that there was something fundamental she needed to resolve in her life. At night, at home, talking with Camila and Dolores, she realized that she had lost contact with her original goals. "I see you're worried, my dear," Dolores told her one night while they cooked together in the small kitchen. "I'm confused, Mom," Lara admitted, peeling potatoes without thinking. 6 months ago, my biggest dream was to get Camila into university. And now everyone talks about me as if I'm a tech genius. But I'm still the same person who cleaned offices to pay the bills. And what's wrong with that? The problem is that I no longer know my place. At Smith Tech, everyone treats me like an expert. In interviews, they call me a pioneer. But when I come home and look in the mirror, I still see Lara, the one who's afraid of not being enough." Dolores stopped chopping onions and looked at her daughter with that mother's wisdom that always calmed her. "Do you know the difference between being lost and growing? No. When you're lost, you want to go back to where you were. When you're growing, you want to discover how far you can go." Those words resonated in Lara's mind during the following days. It was then that a letter arrived that would completely change her vision of the future. The letter came from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. Inside the elegant envelope was a proposal that left Lara speechless. A full scholarship to finish her engineering degree in systems, with a specialization in applied artificial intelligence. But there was a detail that made this offer even more special. The program would take place in collaboration with universities in Guadalajara, which meant she would have to move there for 2 years. It would be a unique opportunity to study with some of the best professors in the country and with international researchers, in addition to developing her own projects with social impact. Lara read the letter 3 times before she could process everything it said. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of years ago, before circumstances forced her to leave her studies. And now, ironically, it arrived at a time when her life seemed to have finally stabilized. Camila was the first to hear about the proposal. "This is incredible, sister," Camila exclaimed, jumping with joy in the living room. "Are you going to accept it, right?" "I don't know," Lara replied, still digesting the magnitude of the decision. "It would mean leaving everything. Work, family, Ethan. But it would be pursuing your true dreams, not the ones that appeared by chance, but the ones you've always had." Lara spent the next few weeks reflecting on the proposal. She spoke with Dolores, who encouraged her to follow her heart. She talked to some colleagues at Smith Tech, who were divided between joy for her opportunity and sadness at a possible farewell. But there was one person with whom she still hadn't shared the news. Ethan. The difficulty of telling him wasn't just professional, but also personal. Since the conference, their relationship had evolved into something undefined, but intense. They weren't officially a couple, but there was an emotional connection that both recognized, although they had never named it. They often had lunch together, talked about things that went far beyond work, and shared moments of complicity that left both in a state of constant expectation. It was as if they were on the verge of something important, but neither dared to take the definitive first step. Finally, Lara decided she had to be honest with him. She scheduled a private chat in Ethan's office on a Friday afternoon when most employees had already left. "I need to tell you something important," she said, sitting in the chair across from his desk. Ethan immediately perceived the seriousness in her tone and expression. "What happened?" "I received a proposal from UNAM, a full scholarship to finish my degree in Guadalajara." Ethan's face showed a series of small reactions: surprise, pride, concern, and finally, an attempt at professional neutrality. "That's fantastic," he said, although his voice had a slight doubt that Lara noticed immediately. "It's exactly the kind of recognition you deserve." "It would be 2 years, full time." "I understand." They were silent for a moment. Lara watched him process the news, seeing how he struggled between his genuine happiness for her and the obvious difficulty of imagining her far away. "Are you going to accept it?" he finally asked. "I'm still deciding. I wanted your opinion." Ethan stood up and walked to the window, which offered a panoramic view of Mexico City. The afternoon lights painted the buildings and busy streets golden. "My opinion as director? It would be a great loss for the company. You've become fundamental to our projects." "And your opinion as Ethan?" He turned to her, and Lara saw a vulnerability in his eyes that deeply moved her. "As Ethan, I would like you to stay, for reasons that go far beyond work." His honesty surprised her. It was the closest thing to a declaration of affection he had ever made. "But," he continued, "I know it would be selfish of me to ask you to reject something like this. You have dreams that existed long before I appeared in your life." Lara stood up and approached him by the window. "And if I stayed, what would happen between us?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I only know that you changed something essential in me. You made me question everything I thought I knew about success, relationships, about what truly matters in life." "You also changed many things in me," she said softly. "You showed me that I can be respected just as I am, without having to pretend to be someone else." They stood side by side, contemplating the city that had brought them together so unexpectedly. The silence was not awkward, but filled with unexplored possibilities. "Do you know what confuses me the most?" Lara said. "I spent so long dreaming of an opportunity like this that now that it finally appears, I don't know if it's what I want. Maybe because you discovered there's more than one way to fulfill your dreams, or maybe because I understood that some dreams can change when we meet special people." Ethan turned completely towards her. "Lara, I don't want you to make a decision thinking about me. I want you to choose what's best for you, even if that means losing you." His generosity moved her. It was precisely the kind of attitude that made her admire him more every day. In the following days, Lara remained undecided. The academic opportunity was truly extraordinary, and she knew it could open many doors for an even more promising future. But her life in Mexico City had become valuable in ways she had never anticipated. A growing career, true friendships at Smith Tech, and a deep emotional connection with Ethan. It was Camilla who once again offered her the perspective she needed. "Do you know what the problem is?" her sister said one night as they studied together in the living room. You're trying to choose between two versions of the future, as if you could only have one. How? You can go to Guadalajara, study, grow, discover new things about yourself, and that doesn't stop you from coming back here better prepared, more confident, more you. And Ethan? If it's true love, he'll wait. If it's not, it's better to know now. Her sister's early wisdom surprised her again. She was right. The decision didn't have to be definitive or exclusive. It could be a period of growth that would ultimately make her better in all aspects of her life. The following Monday, Laura made her decision. She requested a meeting with Ethan and Richard to officially communicate it. "I decided to accept the scholarship," she said, with a firmness that surprised even herself. Richard reacted with genuine enthusiasm, congratulating her on the opportunity. Ethan maintained a professional expression, but Laura noticed a slight stiffness in his posture. "When do you start?" Ethan asked. "In 3 weeks. I need to organize myself, help with the project transition here, and properly say goodbye to everyone. Of course, we'll make sure the transition is as smooth as possible." In the following days, the news spread throughout Smith Tech. Employees reacted with a mixture of sadness and pride, organizing farewell lunches and small tributes. Laura was moved to see how many people had been touched by her presence in the company. The last week arrived faster than anyone expected. Laura carefully organized the handover of her responsibilities, prepared detailed documents on her work methods, and had individual conversations with each team member who had worked with her. The eve of her departure, Ethan invited her to a farewell dinner. It wasn't a formal company event, but a personal date at a small Mexican restaurant they had discovered together during one of their talks about the city. The dinner was bittersweet. They talked about shared memories, projects they developed together, and the changes they had caused in each other's lives. There was a quiet intimacy between them, but also a sadness that could be felt in the atmosphere. "I'm going to miss you," Ethan said as dinner was ending. "Me too," she replied, "but I'm sure it's the right decision." "I know, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to know you, even if for a short time." 2 years isn't forever," she said, smiling, "and who knows what might happen when I come back." Ethan returned her smile, but there was something in his gaze that Laura couldn't quite understand. The next day, Laura made her final arrangements in apartment 104. Dolores and Camila helped her with her suitcases, giving her motherly advice and words of encouragement. The emotion of saying goodbye was softened by the certainty that it would be temporary, and by the joy of the whole family seeing her pursue her dreams. Ethan appeared to say goodbye one last time. He brought a gift, a small cactus in an elegant pot, just like the one she always joked about at the Smith Tech reception. "So you remember that some things survive in any environment," he said, handing her the pot. Laura laughed, moved by the gesture. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." They hugged briefly, and Laura felt there were many things left unsaid between them. But perhaps it was better that way. There are words that need to wait for the right moment to be spoken. Laura got into the car that would take her to the bus terminal. Through the rear window, she saw Ethan watching as the vehicle drove away. He remained there until she disappeared around the corner, and then he returned to his own car. But as he drove back home, Ethan wasn't thinking about the farewell. He was thinking about a plan that had begun to take shape the moment Laura announced her decision. 2 years, he thought. 2 years to prepare for her return. 2 years to become the man she deserved to find when she came back. 2 years to plan the surprise of her life. Ethan smiled for the first time since he knew Laura was leaving. The separation was inevitable, but it wouldn't be the end of the story. It would only be the beginning of a new chapter. 5 months passed like a series of intense days, that Lara barely had time to fully process. In Guadalajara, her life changed in ways she never imagined. University not only offered her the technical knowledge she sought, but also a self-confidence that grew with each project developed, each presentation given, each recognition received. During that time, she developed an artificial intelligence application for small family businesses, collaborated on an educational optimization system, and published an article in a specialized journal that caught the attention of international researchers. Her work sparked the interest of tech companies that sent her proposals for future projects. But as the months passed, Lara felt an increasingly strong call to return to Mexico City. During those 5 months, she maintained regular contact with her family through weekly calls, but conversations with people from Smith Tech gradually decreased. Richard sent occasional messages with updates on company projects. Some colleagues sent photos of meetings and celebrations. Curiously, Ethan remained almost completely silent throughout that time. Lara knew from others that he was doing well, that the company continued to grow, and that he had given some interviews talking about the importance she had in the development of the projects. But between the two of them, communication had been limited to a congratulatory message when her article was published. This lack of direct contact created mixed feelings in Lara. On the one hand, she understood that both needed space to grow separately, but on the other, she missed the conversations they used to have, the intellectual complicity, and that emotional connection they had created. During her last weeks in Guadalajara, while finalizing a project on social applications of artificial intelligence in micro-enterprises, Lara received a call from Camila that left her moved and proud. "Sister, you have to come to my graduation," Camila exclaimed, her voice filled with emotion. "I did it. I'm graduating in biology with honors, and I already have a proposal to start a specialization." "Camila, that's wonderful," Lara replied, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Of course I'll be there. I wouldn't miss that moment for anything in the world. The ceremony will be at the convention center, the same place where you and Ethan gave that incredible presentation. Remember?" Lara smiled, remembering that day perfectly, a day that had marked a before and after in her life. How could I forget? 2 weeks later, Lara returned to Mexico City. The feeling of returning to her familiar streets, of hearing the familiar traffic noise, and smelling the city's typical scent was exciting and nostalgic at the same time. Her family home was still the same, cozy, full of plants, and with that affection that had always made her feel at home. "You're different," her mother said, looking at her with that mother's eye that notices invisible changes. "More mature, more confident." "I feel different," Lara admitted. "These months helped me understand many things about myself." "And about what you really want in life?" Lara was thoughtful for a few seconds, reflecting on that question that had accompanied her all the time in Guadalajara. "I learned that I want to use my intelligence to help other people, and that home is not just a physical place, but where the people you love are." Dolores smiled with that calm wisdom that had always characterized her. Camila's graduation ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. That day, Lara woke up with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. She had chosen an elegant navy blue dress, simple yet sophisticated. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore subtle makeup that highlighted the sparkle in her eyes, full of pride for her sister. The convention center was decorated with white and gold flowers, university flags, and an imposing stage. Hundreds of families filled the rows of chairs, all dressed carefully to celebrate the achievements of their sons and daughters. Lara, Dolores, and some aunts and uncles sat in the central part of the auditorium, from where they had a perfect view of the stage. Camila was among the graduates, radiant in her cap and gown, discreetly greeting her family when she saw them. The ceremony proceeded with the solemnity typical of such events. The rector gave an inspiring speech about the future of the new professionals. Honored professors spoke about the value of effort and knowledge. And finally, it was time to hand out the diplomas. When Camilla's name was called, Lara stood up and applauded enthusiastically, feeling her heart fill with pride. Her sister walked across the stage elegantly, received her diploma, and waved to the family again. It was a moment of pure joy. After the presentation, the rector announced that there would be a special intervention before concluding the ceremony. "We are honored to welcome a special guest who wants to share a few words with our graduates and their families," he said into the microphone. Lara was distracted, quietly talking to Dolores about plans for the family celebration, when a familiar voice sounded over the auditorium's loudspeakers. "Good afternoon. My name is Ethan Smith." Lara froze. Her heart pounded, and she turned her face to the stage so quickly she almost lost her balance. There he was, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his hair perfectly combed, but with an expression she had never seen before, visible nervousness mixed with firm determination. "What is he doing here?" she murmured, looking at Dolores, who smiled in a way that suggested she knew more than she was willing to say. "Today, I didn't just come to congratulate the graduates of this prestigious university," Ethan continued, his voice resonating clearly in the auditorium, "but also to talk about transformation, about how one person can completely change the course of our lives in ways we never imagined possible." Lara felt the color drain from her face. Hundreds of people in the auditorium looked at her, many recognizing her from the news stories that had circulated months ago. She wanted to disappear, but she couldn't take her eyes off Ethan. "A few months ago, I was the kind of person who believed that success was only measured in numbers, profits, and professional achievements," he said, walking slowly across the stage. "I lived in a bubble of corporate coldness, convinced that emotions were unnecessary distractions for anyone who wanted to reach the top." Murmurs were heard in the audience. Some parents leaned in to whisper, trying to guess where all this was leading. But then, one night, while working late in my office, an extraordinary woman solved in seconds a problem that had stumped 20 of our best specialists for weeks. That woman had no university degree at the time. She didn't wear expensive clothes, nor did she speak the business language that I considered indispensable. Ethan stopped in the center of the stage and looked directly at where Lara was sitting. She cleaned our offices, but what I didn't know was that she was about to clean something much more important. She was going to clean all the barriers I had built around my heart. Lara felt her eyes fill with tears. Dolores took her hand and squeezed it lovingly. "Lara Rodriguez," Ethan said, and her name echoed through the auditorium like a solemn announcement. "She taught me that intelligence doesn't depend on titles or diplomas. She showed me that courage is facing prejudice with dignity. She made me discover that laughter can solve problems that cold logic never could." The auditorium was completely silent now, captivated by the frankness of that man, who was clearly making the most important declaration of his life. For 5 months, I tried to convince myself that I was fine without her, that I could go back to being who I was before I met her. But the truth is, she didn't just change my company or my way of working. She fundamentally changed who I am. Ethan pulled something from the inside pocket of his jacket. Lara saw it was a small velvet box. "Lara," he said, his voice amplified not only by the microphone, but by genuine emotion. "You cleaned floors, and now you've cleaned my heart." The entire auditorium turned to look at her. She was visibly emotional and completely surprised. Some people began to smile, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. I know this isn't the conventional way to do it, Ethan continued, opening the small box and revealing a simple yet elegant ring. I know I'm interrupting your sister's graduation ceremony and exposing our feelings in front of hundreds of strangers, but I learned from you that the best solutions are usually the most direct and honest. He paused, took a deep breath, and spoke the words that would change their lives forever. Laura Rodriguez, will you marry me? The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed eternal. Then, slowly, Laura stood up. Tears streamed freely down her face, but she was smiling in a way that lit up the entire auditorium. The whole audience turned towards her, awaiting her answer. Camila, still on stage with the other graduates, had her hands over her heart, visibly emotional as she witnessed that moment. Laura wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and said with enough force for everyone to hear, "Only if you clean the house today." The auditorium erupted in laughter and applause. Her answer was so uniquely her, with humor, affection, and a touch of irony that perfectly defined the personality that had won Ethan over from day one. Ethan also laughed, descended from the stage, and walked quickly towards her. When they finally met in the aisle between the rows of chairs, he hugged her and kissed her, while hundreds of people applauded, standing. "Is that a yes?" he whispered in her ear. "Does it mean you have a lot of floor to clean?" she replied, laughing and crying at the same time. "I accept the challenge," he said, placing the ring on her finger. Camila's graduation ceremony had unexpectedly transformed into Laura's engagement ceremony, and as the auditorium continued to applaud, the three most important women in Ethan's life, Laura, Dolores, and Camila, smiled with a happiness that made that moment absolutely perfect. 3 months after the most unexpected marriage proposal in the history of the Mexico City Convention Center, Laura and Ethan were about to formalize their union in a ceremony that promised to be as unique as the love story that led them to that moment. The chosen venue was the garden of the Hotel Casa de las Flores, a charming space in the heart of Coyoacán, decorated with traditional Mexican flowers in vibrant shades of orange, pink, and yellow. Colorful papel picado hung among the trees, creating a festive ceiling that swayed gently with the afternoon breeze. It was exactly the kind of celebration that matched Laura's authentic personality. Elegant, but relaxed. Sophisticated, but accessible. The morning of the wedding found Ethan in a state of nerves that surprised even Richard, his best man and best friend. In the hotel room, Ethan adjusted his tie for the 10th time in 5 minutes, while Richard watched him, amused. "You're more nervous than before the presentation to the Japanese investors," Richard commented, adjusting his own suit. "That was just money," Ethan replied, running his hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "This is my whole life. She already said yes, remember? In front of 500 people. It's hard for her to change her mind now." Ethan smiled nervously, looking at his watch for the 20th time. There were 2 hours until the ceremony, but he felt that the minutes were passing twice as fast. On the other side of the hotel, in the bridal preparation suite, the atmosphere was completely different. Laura was surrounded by Camila, Dolores, and her 2 closest cousins, all laughing as they helped her with the final touches of her dress. "Stop making jokes for 5 minutes so I can properly put on this veil," Camila said, trying not to laugh. "I can't," Laura replied, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "If I stop making jokes, I'm going to start crying, and all my makeup will run." Laura's dress was the perfect choice, elegant without being flashy, with a cut that naturally enhanced her figure. The fabric draped softly, creating a sophisticated image that remained true to her style. Her hair was styled in a romantic updo, with some loose strands framing her radiant face. "You look beautiful, my dear," Dolores said, smoothing a small wrinkle in the dress. "Your father would be very proud." Lara felt her eyes fill with tears, but managed to quickly hold them back. "He is proud," she said, touching the small brooch that had belonged to her father and that she wore on her bouquet. "I'm sure of it." At 4 in the afternoon, guests began to arrive at the garden. It was an interesting mix. Impeccably dressed Smith Tech executives, university professors, neighbors from Lara's childhood neighborhood, colleagues from Guadalajara, and a surprising number of people who had known the couple's story through the media. Dr. Howard Lang, always formal, chatted animatedly with Aunt Rosa about artificial intelligence systems, while she explained how she used an app to control her family budget. Richard circulated among the groups, making sure everyone felt welcome, while a mariachi band discreetly prepared in a corner of the garden. When it was time for the ceremony, Ethan stood at the improvised altar under an arch of natural flowers. His hands trembled slightly, but his smile was genuine and full of confidence. The music began to play, and the guests stood up. Camila was the first to walk down the aisle, radiant as a bridesmaid, followed by the other bridesmaids. Then, at the most anticipated moment, Lara appeared at the end of the aisle, walking beside Dolores, who would accompany her to the altar. The garden fell completely silent as she began to walk forward. Ethan looked at her with an expression of pure admiration, as if he were witnessing a miracle. Lara, for her part, couldn't stop smiling, especially when she saw Ethan discreetly wipe away a tear. "Don't start crying now," she whispered when she reached the altar, "because if you do, I will too." "It's too late," he murmured in response, making her laugh softly. The ceremony was officiated by a family friend judge who knew the couple's story well. He spoke about how true love often appears in the most unexpected places, between people who seem to come from different worlds, but who discover deep connections with each other. During the exchange of vows, Ethan spoke about how Lara had not only transformed his personal life, but also his understanding of what truly matters in the world. Lara, true to her style, delivered vows that provoked laughter and tears at the same time, promising to clean his sorrows, organize life's messes, and maintain good humor, even when he forgot to wash the dishes. "Do you accept Ethan Smith as your husband?" the judge asked. "I accept, as long as he agrees to share household chores equally," she replied, causing laughter among the guests. "And you, Ethan, do you accept Lara Rodriguez as your wife?" "I accept, and promise to learn how to correctly use all cleaning products," he said, looking her directly in the eyes. When they were finally declared husband and wife, the kiss was accompanied by an explosion of applause, shouts of joy, and the festive sound of the mariachis, who began to play a romantic version of Bésame Mucho. The party that followed was exactly as Lara had dreamed it, vibrant, open, and full of life. The buffet offered a delicious mix of traditional Mexican food with some international dishes so that all guests felt included. There were tacos, enchiladas, mole poblano, and fresh horchata water, along with more formal options. The dance floor became the center of the celebration when the band started playing salsa. Lara and Ethan opened the dance with a simple choreography she had taught him during wedding rehearsals. At first, he moved a bit stiffly, but soon he let himself be carried away by the rhythm and the infectious joy of the music. "You're not bad at all for a tech CEO," she shouted over the music. "You're not bad either for a woman who started cleaning offices and ended up as an engineer," he replied, spinning her with more confidence. "Ex-cleaner," she corrected. "Now I'm an entrepreneur." Over the past few months, Lara and Ethan had developed a joint project that would come to fruition after their honeymoon, a social enterprise dedicated to training young people from peripheral communities in programming and technology. The idea arose naturally from Lara's life experiences and Ethan's newfound social awareness. The company, which would be called Código Libre, free code, would offer free courses in programming, application development, and artificial intelligence for low-income youth, creating real opportunities for advancement through technology. It was the perfect combination of both their dreams, using technical knowledge to generate positive social impact. "You're going to change many lives," Camila said during her bridesmaid speech, "just as you changed each other's lives." When the party began to wind down, it was past midnight. Guests said their goodbyes with warm hugs and promises to see each other again soon. Lara and Ethan stayed in the garden, watching the last groups chat under the soft lights that decorated the trees. "So, Mr. Smith," she said, playing with the new ring on her finger, "ready for real life?" "With you?" he replied, putting his arm around her waist. "I'm ready for anything." They walked slowly back to the hotel, still in their wedding attire, talking about their honeymoon plans, the company they would create together, and all the adventures that awaited them. The next morning, as they packed for their trip, Ethan watched Lara carefully pack the small cactus he had given her years ago. The plant had grown and become stronger, just like the love between them. "You know this is the best decision I've ever made in my life," he said, closing his suitcase. "Which one? Asking me to marry you or learning to clean the house?" she asked, laughing. "Both, but above all, falling in love with you." Lara stopped what she was doing and looked at him with that smile that had changed his life from the very first day. "And do you know what the best decision of my life was?" she asked. "Which one?" "Having the courage to solve that equation that night, even though I had no idea where it would lead me." They kissed once more, ready to officially begin their life together. Not just as husband and wife, but as partners in every sense. In life, in love, and in the mission to use their experiences to pave the way for others. Did you like Lara and Ethan's story? Let us know your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score do you give it? Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss any of our stories. And take the opportunity to see more exciting stories by clicking here on the final screen.